The words hung in the air like suspended dust particles caught in a beam of sunlight. Ryan Parker stood frozen, his coffee mug halfway to his lips, as the entire office fell silent. What had started as a harmless joke at his boss's birthday celebration had somehow morphed into the most defining moment of his life. But to understand how we got here, how a struggling single dad's throwaway comment changed everything, we need to go back to the beginning. If you're enjoying this incredible true story of unexpected connections and second chances, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more heartwarming content that reminds us all of the magic that can happen when we least expect it. Ryan Parker never planned on raising his daughter alone. At 34, he had imagined a different life, one with a partner by his side, weekend family outings, and someone to share the quiet moments after Emma was tucked into bed. Instead, he found himself juggling early morning school drop-offs, client meetings that ran late, and the constant, gnawing fear that he wasn't enough for his 7-year-old daughter. 3 years earlier, Ryan's wife Melissa had walked out, leaving behind a hastily scribbled note and a void that seemed impossible to fill. "I can't do this anymore," she'd written. "I never wanted this life." The words had cut deeper than any knife, not just for the abandonment they represented, but for the implication that their daughter, their beautiful, curious, compassionate Emma, was somehow a mistake. The first year had been the hardest. Ryan had stumbled through each day in a fog, learning through trial and error how to braid Emma's hair, what foods would actually make it into her lunchbox rather than the trash, and how to soothe nightmares that left her calling for a mother who would never answer. He'd nearly lost his job at Harrison and Wells Marketing during those dark months, his performance slipping as he struggled to balance work demands with single parenthood. That's when Catherine Wells had stepped in. As the co-founder and creative director of the firm, Catherine had a reputation for brilliant strategy and exacting standards. At 41, she had built the company from nothing into one of the most respected boutique marketing agencies in Seattle. Unmarried and seemingly married to her work, Catherine was feared and respected in equal measure by the staff. "Parker, my office," she had said one rainy Tuesday afternoon, her voice carrying across the open workspace. Ryan had followed her, stomach knotted, already mentally updating his resume. Instead, Catherine had closed the door and offered him a chair. "Your work has been suffering," she said, no preamble, no cushioning. "But your portfolio and your first year with us showed exceptional talent." Ryan had nodded, throat too tight for words. "I understand you're raising your daughter alone now," she continued, surprising him with this personal knowledge. "That can't be easy." "It's not," he'd admitted, the simple truth somehow liberating after months of insisting he had everything under control. What happened next had shocked him. Catherine had rearranged his schedule, allowing him to work from home 2 days a week. She'd assigned him to accounts that played to his strengths rather than overwhelming him with new challenges. And most surprisingly, she'd shared her own story. "My mother raised me alone after my father died," she told him. "I was 9. I watched her struggle to keep her career while being there for me. It shaped everything about who I am today." That conversation had marked a turning point. Under Catherine's measured guidance, Ryan had found his footing both professionally and personally. He'd stopped seeing his situation as a failure and started recognizing his own strength. And somehow, over the next 2 years, Catherine had become not just his boss but something close to a friend. Which made what happened at her birthday celebration all the more complicated. The company had gathered in the sleek conference room, festooned with tasteful decorations courtesy of the office manager. Catherine had seemed uncomfortable with the attention, trying to redirect conversations away from herself even as she graciously accepted cards and well wishes. Ryan had watched her, seeing beyond the polished exterior to the subtle signs of discomfort. He'd gotten good at reading her over the years. When she opened his gift, a first edition of her favorite poet's work that he'd hunted down for months, her composure had slipped momentarily. "How did you find this?" she'd asked, voice softer than anyone in the office had likely ever heard it. Ryan had shrugged. "I pay attention." Something had shifted in her expression then, a moment of genuine vulnerability that made his heart beat faster. And that's when Emma, who had come to the office after school that day, had tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, Ms. Wells looks like a princess in that dress," she'd whispered, not quite softly enough. Catherine had overheard, a smile touching her lips as she knelt to Emma's level. "That's the nicest compliment I've received all day, Emma." "Thank you. My daddy thinks you're pretty too," Emma had announced with the unfiltered honesty of childhood. "He said you looked really beautiful at the client dinner last week." Ryan had felt his face burning as Catherine's eyes had flicked up to his, a question in them he couldn't decipher. "Well," he'd said, desperate to break the moment, "if I wasn't terrified of workplace harassment policies, I'd just propose right now. Catherine Wells, with that smile and a first edition Dickinson, will you marry me?" He delivered it with an exaggerated wink, ensuring everyone could tell it was a joke. The office had erupted in laughter, the tension broken. Everyone except Catherine, who had straightened slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "And if I wasn't your boss, Ryan Parker," she'd said quietly, the room falling silent as people strained to hear, "I'd be tempted to say yes." That was the moment frozen in time, Ryan with his coffee mug suspended, the office collectively holding its breath, and Catherine looking as shocked by her own words as everyone else. What happened next would change everything, but not in the ways anyone might have expected. Catherine had recovered first, smoothly thanking everyone for the celebration before retreating to her office. The party had continued awkwardly without her, speculation buzzing through the room. Ryan had felt simultaneously elated and terrified, unsure what to make of her response. Had it been just a clever comeback, or something more? That evening, after putting Emma to bed, Ryan sat on his small apartment balcony, replaying the moment over and over. His phone buzzed with a text message from a number he didn't immediately recognize. "This is Catherine. We should talk about what happened today. Coffee tomorrow morning at Westlake Park, 7:30? Away from the office." Ryan had stared at the message for a full minute before responding with a simple, "I'll be there." Sleep had been impossible that night. By morning, he'd convinced himself he was about to be fired, or at minimum, transferred to another department. He'd arranged for his neighbor to walk Emma to school and arrived at the park 15 minutes early, his stomach in knots. Catherine was already there, seated on a bench with 2 coffee cups beside her. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, a stark contrast to her usual tailored business attire, and looked as though she'd slept as poorly as he had. "I got you black coffee, 2 sugars, she said as he approached. "That's how you take it, right?" "Yes," he replied, surprised she knew this detail. "Catherine, about yesterday." She held up a hand. "Let me speak first, please." She took a deep breath. "What I said was unprofessional. I put you in an awkward position, and I apologize for that." "You don't need to apologize," Ryan said. "I'm the one who made the joke in the first place." "Yes, but my response crossed a line. I'm your boss. There are power dynamics at play that make any personal feelings inappropriate to express." Ryan felt a surge of courage. "Personal feelings?" Catherine looked away, watching a pair of joggers pass by. "Ryan, I've respected you for a long time. You're talented, dedicated, and the way you've stepped up for Emma." She paused. "I admire that more than I can say." "But?" Ryan prompted, hearing the unspoken word. "But I'm 10 years older than you. I'm your direct supervisor. And I've spent my entire adult life avoiding exactly this kind of situation." Ryan studied her profile, seeing the conflict written across features he had come to know so well. "Can I ask you something?" At her nod, he continued. "Was what you said yesterday true? Not that you would say yes, I understand the joke, but the implication that if circumstances were different, you might see me as something other than an employee?" Catherine turned to face him, and for the first time since he'd known her, she seemed uncertain. "Yes," she said simply. "But that doesn't change the reality of our situation." What followed was the most honest conversation Ryan had had with anyone since Melissa left. They sat in that park for nearly 2 hours as the morning crowd ebbed and flowed around them, talking about everything, their fears, their hopes, the complicated feelings that had developed between them over the past 2 years. Catherine spoke about her own parents' difficult marriage, how it had made her wary of relationships and led her to pour herself into building her company instead. She talked about watching Ryan with Emma, how it had challenged her assumptions about family life. Ryan shared his insecurities about being enough for Emma, the lingering shame of his failed marriage, and his reluctance to trust anyone with his heart again. And he admitted that somewhere along the way, his gratitude toward Catherine had evolved into something deeper. "So what do we do now?" he finally asked as they reached the bottom of their long cold coffees. Catherine straightened her shoulders, some of her usual composure returning. "The right thing. I'm going to speak with the board about restructuring the creative department. Javier is ready to take over day-to-day management. I'll remain involved in strategy, but you would report to him, not to me. You'd change the entire organization because of one comment?" "No," she said with unexpected gentleness. "I'd change it because some things are worth taking a chance on, even when they're complicated." The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. Catherine was true to her word, implementing changes that created a professional buffer between them. There were raised eyebrows and whispered speculations, but as no policy had been violated, the storm of office gossip eventually passed. Their first official date happened a month later, a quiet dinner at a restaurant across town where they were unlikely to encounter colleagues. Catherine had arrived looking nervous, a state Ryan had never associated with her before. "I haven't done this in years," she admitted as they studied their menus. "Actual dating?" "Me neither," Ryan said. "Not since college, really. Melissa and I were already together then." An awkward silence fell between them. Outside of work and that one revealing conversation in the park, they knew surprisingly little about each other's personal lives. "Tell me about Emma," Catherine said finally. "Not the logistics of parenting that you mention at work, but what she's really like." Ryan's face had transformed at the question, anxiety melting into genuine warmth. "She's amazing. Stubborn in all the best ways. She's been reading these science books lately and has decided she wants to be a bug doctor. Yesterday she spent 3 hours in the park documenting different insects in this little notebook she carries everywhere." As he spoke about Emma's determination to save earthworms after rainstorms and her elaborate bedtime ritual that absolutely could not be altered, Catherine watched him with a softness in her expression he'd never seen before. "You're a wonderful father," she said when he finally paused. "You know that, right?" The simple validation nearly undid him. "I try," he managed. "Some days are better than others." "That's true of everything worth doing," she replied. From there, the conversation had flowed more naturally. They discovered shared tastes in film and music, debated politics with surprising agreement, and found they both harbored secret dreams of writing, short stories for him, poetry for her, that they'd never pursued. The evening ended with a brief, tentative kiss beside her car that left Ryan feeling like a teenager again, simultaneously terrified and exhilarated by the possibilities stretching before them. Integrating Catherine into his life with Emma proved more challenging than Ryan had anticipated. Emma, who had always liked Ms. Wells from their office interactions, was confused by her new role. "Is she your girlfriend now?" Emma had asked one Sunday morning as Ryan prepared pancakes, Catherine expected for brunch later. "We're spending time together to see if we might be a good match," Ryan had answered carefully. Emma had considered this with all the seriousness a 7-year-old could muster. "Do you kiss her?" "Sometimes," Ryan admitted, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. "Does that mean you don't love mommy anymore?" The question had stopped him cold. Despite everything, he'd never spoken ill of Melissa to Emma, allowing her to maintain whatever relationship she could with her mother through infrequent phone calls and birthday cards. "Loving someone new doesn't erase loving someone in the past," he'd said finally, choosing his words with care. Just like how when you made friends with Zoe this year, it didn't make you and Lily any less friends, right? Emma had nodded slowly, processing this. But Ms. Wells isn't going to be my new mommy, is she? No, sweetheart. You have a mommy. Catherine would just be Catherine. Someone who cares about both of us, in her own way. Catherine had arrived an hour later, bringing a small science kit for Emma that had immediately won the child over. Watching them hunched over the kitchen table, conducting simple experiments with household materials, Ryan had felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. For the first time since Melissa left, the future seemed to hold more promise than pain. But life rarely unfolds without complications. 6 months into their carefully cultivated relationship, just as they'd settled into a comfortable rhythm, Melissa reappeared. Ryan had been preparing dinner, Catherine helping Emma with homework at the kitchen table, when the doorbell rang. Opening it to find his ex-wife standing there had been like seeing a ghost, someone from another lifetime who nonetheless had the power to upend his current reality. "Hello, Ryan," Melissa said, looking both the same and somehow completely different. Her hair was shorter, her face thinner, but her eyes still held the restless dissatisfaction he remembered. "What are you doing here?" he'd managed, aware of Emma calling, "Who is it, Daddy?" from the kitchen. Melissa's expression had shifted at the sound of their daughter's voice. "I wanted to see her. To talk to you both." Before Ryan could respond, Emma had appeared beside him, freezing at the sight of her mother. The book she'd been holding slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a thud that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "Mommy?" The word was barely audible, a breath more than a sound. What followed were weeks of turmoil. Melissa, claiming to have found herself after 3 years of minimal contact, wanted to be part of Emma's life again. She'd moved back to Seattle, gotten a job teaching at a yoga studio, and insisted she was ready for the responsibilities she'd once fled. Catherine had stepped back, giving Ryan space to navigate this complicated situation. "Emma needs to come first," she'd said when he apologized for canceling plans 3 times in a row. "I understand that better than anyone." But the distance between them grew as Ryan struggled to establish boundaries with Melissa while supporting Emma through the emotional whiplash of her mother's return. The careful foundation he and Catherine had built began to show cracks, strained by circumstances neither had anticipated. The breaking point came on a rainy night in November, 7 months after that fateful birthday celebration. Catherine had come over after Emma was asleep, her expression grave. "I think we need to talk," she'd said, declining his offer of wine. Ryan had felt his stomach drop. "That sounds ominous." "I've been offered a position overseeing the opening of our New York office," she said, meeting his eyes directly. 6 months, possibly longer. "The board wants me to handle it personally." "When did this happen?" "The discussion started last week. I made my decision yesterday." Ryan had struggled to process her words. "And you're just telling me now? Were you even going to ask how I felt about it? Would it have changed anything?" Catherine countered. "Your life has become incredibly complicated, Ryan. Emma needs stability right now, not her father trying to maintain a long-distance relationship. So you're making this decision for me? For us?" He'd felt anger rising, unexpected and hot. "That's remarkably presumptuous, even for you." Catherine had flinched at his tone but held her ground. "I'm making the best decision I can with the information I have. You've cancelled our last 5 plans together. You barely return my texts. When we do talk, your mind is elsewhere. My ex-wife just reappeared after abandoning our daughter. What exactly did you expect?" "I expected to be part of the conversation," Catherine had said, her voice quieter now. "Not an afterthought you fit in when everything else is handled." The silence that followed had been heavy with unspoken words and mounting regret. "I care about you, Ryan. More than I've cared about anyone in a very long time," Catherine had finally continued. "But I won't compete for scraps of your attention. And I won't ask you to divide yourself further when Emma needs you whole. So that's it? You're just leaving? Catherine had stood then, gathering her coat. I'm accepting a professional opportunity that makes sense for me right now. And I'm giving you the space to focus on what matters most, your daughter. She'd paused at the door, looking back at him with eyes that held too many emotions to name. For what it's worth, these past months have shown me what might be possible. Maybe someday, when the timing is better. She'd left the thought unfinished, slipping out into the rain before he could find the words to stop her. The next 3 months had been among the most difficult of Ryan's life. He'd thrown himself into creating stability for Emma, establishing a careful co-parenting relationship with Melissa while maintaining firm boundaries. At work, he avoided the executive floor where Catherine's office sat empty, her interim replacement a constant reminder of her absence. It was Emma who ultimately forced him to confront the situation. One evening as he tucked her in, she'd asked suddenly, "Why don't we see Catherine anymore? Is she mad at us?" Ryan had sighed, sitting on the edge of her bed. "No, sweetheart. She's working in New York for a while." But why did she leave? Was it because Mommy came back? The innocent question had struck too close to the truth. It's complicated, Em. Sometimes grown-ups need to make hard choices. Emma had considered this with surprising maturity. You're sad without her. I can tell. I miss her, Ryan had admitted, the first time he'd said the words aloud. Then why don't you tell her? When I missed Lily after she was mad at me, I made her a card and said I was sorry. It worked. Out of the mouths of babes, Ryan had thought, a plan beginning to form in his mind. 2 weeks later, he stood in the lobby of Catherine's New York office building, heart pounding as he waited for her to come down. When the elevator doors opened and she appeared, the shock on her face was almost worth the cross-country flight and elaborate childcare arrangements he'd made. Ryan? What are you doing here? He'd taken a deep breath, suddenly doubting the grand gesture. Making a fool of myself, possibly. Do you have a few minutes to talk? They'd found a quiet cafe nearby, an awkward silence stretching between them until their coffees arrived. How's Emma? Catherine had asked finally. She's good. Better. She's the one who told me I should come find you, actually. Catherine's eyebrows had risen. She did? She said I was sad without you. Kids don't miss much. He'd paused, gathering his courage. She was right. These past months have been clarifying. In what way? Catherine's voice was carefully neutral. I realized I was trying to fix the past instead of building the future, Ryan said simply. Melissa coming back stirred up all these old feelings of failure and inadequacy. I thought I needed to prove something, to her, to Emma, to myself. But that was never the real issue. He'd met Catherine's eyes then, finding them softer than he'd dared hope. The real issue was that I was falling in love with you, and it terrified me. Because the last time I loved someone, they walked away and broke my daughter's heart along with mine. Catherine had been silent for a long moment. I'm not Melissa, she said finally. No, you're not, he agreed. You're the person who saw me at my lowest and helped me find my strength again. You're the person who makes me want to be better, as a father, as a professional, as a man. You're the person I think about first thing in the morning and last thing at night. He'd reached across the table, tentatively covering her hand with his. I know the timing is still complicated. I know there are no guarantees. But I flew 3,000 miles to ask if you'd be willing to try again, with clearer expectations and better communication this time. Catherine had turned her hand beneath his, intertwining their fingers. I've missed you too, she admitted. More than I expected to. Enough to consider coming back to Seattle, he'd asked, hope rising. My commitment here ends in 6 weeks, she'd said thoughtfully. And I've been considering restructuring the leadership team again anyway. Ryan had felt a smile spreading across his face. Is that a yes? It's a, let's see where this goes, Catherine had replied, but her smile matched his own. One step at a time. They'd spent the weekend together, walking through Central Park and talking for hours in Catherine's temporary apartment, rebuilding the connection that had been fractured but never fully broken. By the time Ryan boarded his flight home, they had a plan, weekly video calls with Emma included, a visit from Catherine in 3 weeks, and a tentative return to Seattle before spring. The following 2 months had brought their own challenges. Emma had initially been wary of Catherine's reappearance in their lives, afraid of another person disappearing. Melissa had raised eyebrows at the relationship, though she had little ground to stand on when it came to questioning Ryan's personal choices. But gradually, a new normal had emerged. Catherine returned to Seattle as promised, taking a modified role in the company that allowed her more flexibility. She rented an apartment in the same neighborhood as Ryan, close enough for convenience but maintaining separate spaces as they navigated their evolving relationship. By summer, Emma was splitting weekends between her parents and occasionally spending evenings with Ryan and Catherine together. The first time she fell asleep on Catherine's couch during movie night, her head resting trustingly against Catherine's shoulder, Ryan had felt something heal inside him that he hadn't even realized was still broken. Which brings us back to where our story began, 1 year after that fateful birthday celebration, at Catherine's next office party. The firm had grown, nearly doubling in size, with new faces mingling among the familiar ones. Ryan stood by the window, watching Catherine move through the crowd with her characteristic grace. She caught his eye across the room and smiled, a private moment in the midst of the celebration. Later, as the party wound down, he'd found her alone in her office, gazing out at the Seattle skyline. "Escaping your own party?" he'd asked, closing the door behind him. "Just taking a moment," she replied, turning to face him. "This year has brought more changes than I ever expected." Ryan had crossed the room to stand beside her, their shoulders touching as they looked out at the city lights. "Good changes?" "The best," she'd said softly. He'd taken a small box from his pocket then, heart racing as he turned to face her. No joke this time, no audience, no pretense. "Catherine Wells," he'd begun, watching her eyes widen as she realized what was happening. "A year ago, I made a joke that changed everything. Today, I'm deadly serious." He'd opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Will you marry me? Will you be part of our family, not to replace anyone, but to add your own irreplaceable presence to our lives?" For a breathless moment, Catherine had stood perfectly still, tears gathering in her eyes. Then she'd laughed, a sound of pure joy that Ryan had rarely heard from her. "You know," she'd said, taking his face in her hands, "if anyone had told me last year that my marketing director would be proposing to me in my office, I'd have fired them for poor judgment." Ryan had smiled, heart still hammering. "Is that a yes or a no?" "Because Emma helped me pick out the ring, and she's going to want a full report." "It's a yes," Catherine had whispered against his lips. "It's absolutely, definitely yes." 6 months later, they were married in a simple ceremony with Emma as the flower girl and self-proclaimed best kid. Catherine had legally adopted Emma when she turned 10, creating a family bound not by obligation but by choice and love. And the company? Harrison and Wells became Parker, Harrison and Wells, recognizing Ryan's contributions and cementing their professional partnership alongside their personal one. Life isn't a fairy tale. There were still difficult days, teenage Emma testing boundaries, professional disagreements brought home, the continuing dance of co-parenting with Melissa. But through it all, Ryan and Catherine faced each challenge together, their unlikely beginning becoming the foundation for something stronger than either had dared to imagine. Sometimes, the most life-changing moments arrive disguised as jokes, as mistakes, as impossible timing. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to pursue them, they lead us exactly where we need to go. If you've been moved by Ryan and Catherine's journey, remember that love often finds us when we least expect it. Life's detours can become our most meaningful destinations. Please like this video if you'd like to hear more stories of unexpected connections, and subscribe to our channel for weekly content that celebrates the beautiful complexity of human relationships. Because ultimately, isn't that what we're all searching for? Not perfect timing or fairy tale beginnings, but the courage to say yes to possibility, even when it arrives in the most unexpected package.